Okay, I'm going to make this really simple. This is going to be the last step, hopefully, on Ansel Adams' zone system. Now, I created this little setup in about 5 minutes. I have Ansel Adams' zone system right here. I have my highlights, this little white bottle up here, as it's closest to the light. Down here in the bottom right, I have some stamps and I have some writing. And this little sea urchin, I have a perfect transition between illumination to dark side texture of where it is not illuminated here. So I have illumination up here, so I actually have a perfect analog. Obviously human skin doesn't look like that, but I have a perfect percentage analog to human skin as represented by the sea urchin, as it's half illuminated and half in the dark. So what I've done is I've thrown my camera into spot metering. Okay, my camera has told me, as I have metered for the brightest part of my highlight on this entire seam, which is all the way down to the stamp, all the way up to the top of my white bottle. On image number 1, I have ISO 800. I'm set up for 50th of a second at f9. Okay, now if I actually take a look at my Ansel Adams 11-stop zone system here, with the dynamic range of 9, but a textural range of 7, as I mentioned in prior videos. As I've spot metered for only the highlight, which is a very fine meter. Remember, camera wants to turn everything into sludge, okay? Even as I've spot metered for that tiny bright white spot on the white part of my bottle at 1/50th of a second at f9, my camera is exposing that not as the white that it truly is, that I am able to see with my eyes. But if I were to zoom in, I would say it is mostly white, but if I actually put it up next to a chart, I can see that it is actually gray. So we're talking about exposing for that highlight. So I'll get to the point right here in a second. But if I zoom in to my my Ansel Adams zone system that I have pasted right here, which is all in the shadow, on the chalkboard there is actually inverse numeral illumination printing on the zone system there. And I'm actually able to determine that from what I'm able to read at the exposure, that at that exposure I'm able to read only the letter, the number 5. So everything like 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 I'm unable to read. Now what I did on the next shot is what you would have done accurately if you were working on last month's contest, where the contest was to capture something that was 85% black. Hopefully you didn't do a lot of post-processing manipulation, but I didn't put that in as a stipulation. 85% black and only 15%. So you're trying to capture that 7-stop tonal range. Of course, composition is separate to this. You're trying to capture in that textural tonal range, the 7-stop tonal range, within only that 15% of the image that you took. So, and this is why a lot of folks, understandably so, because it was a tough contest to do that accurately unless you practiced on it. And what I did to do that is I closed down 3 more stops. So instead of 1/50th of a second at f9, I closed down my aperture to a higher f-stop, which means that not only made my bottle darker, it totally lost everything on, let me zoom in to reconfirm, I looked at it a second ago. Everything on the Ansel Adams zone, everything other than 10 is invisible. It is just all those, everything down here, as far as the numbers 0 through 10 are invisible, except barely number 10 is invisible. So I closed down 3 stops, but what that did is, if this were a person's face, if you were to imagine this entire scene that you see here before you as a human's face, and the white bottle would be the highlight of someone's eye or their cheek or whatnot, and the sea urchin, it's a little hollow sea urchin here, is a perfect tonal representation of human skin and texture right here, as I have illuminated with the laser. If you're able to see that and understand what it is I'm talking about, if I'm able to zoom in, I would have created a perfect shot that is applicable to the shots that you people yourselves agreed had a 4, 5, 6, or even 7-stop tonal range value. The award winner of last month's contest and the few runner-ups on the shots that were mostly dark, even though there's only 15% of the image that wasn't black, that 15% had a texture and a tonal range that is aesthetically... Humans love two things, okay? You think they love sharpness, which they do, okay? They love texture as equal or more so than sharpness. You need to understand that. So the texture and the tonal range within the 7-stop value between 2 through 8 on Ansel Adams' zone system, and when I'm looking at the sea urchin, if I were to recreate last month's image contest, I spot metered for the white part of the bottle, which was which was a 50th of a second at f9, and I closed down my aperture, meaning increased my f-stop number. And what that did is it blacked out most of the image, except it gave me perfect, okay, tonal range on every part of the urchin, not just the illuminated top part, but the bottom part as well, and on the bottle. And that would mean, like if I were taking a picture of a person's face, like the award winner from last month, it would have turned out perfect. He may have been using the same sort of system. I don't know if he actually did some of that in post. You can't actually do that all in post, because if I were to shoot on the first shot and actually expose for the 18% gray as I spot metered it at 1/50th of a second at f9 on shot number 1, then what that would have done is it would have compressed my Ansel Adams zonal textural range between 2 and 7 into mud. So some of you actually, it doesn't matter what you do in post, you can increase the contrast and you can use all sorts of paint tools, but mud is mud is mud. I mean, it's the same thing with blowing highlights. I mean, there's really nothing you can do with blowing highlights, and there's damn little you can do with mud. So what I did, if I were competing for last month's contest, is I closed down 3 stops from the spot meter, okay, not matrix metering, or the center weight metering, but I closed down 3 stops from the spot metering of the brightest part of my highlight, which is the edge of this white bottle. And that would have given me perfect exposure for last month's contest. And that way I wouldn't have had muddy midtones, which is between 2 to 7 on the textual range of Ansel Adams' zone system, 2 through 8 of Ansel Adams' zone system. So that would have been perfect for that. See, this is the reason why, and there are many books on this. Some of you actually vociferously Ansel Adams' zone system is not applicable to digital photography. Yes, it is. And I'm not saying you need to be thinking about the zone system. What I'm saying is that, like your camera, you need to be forgetting about it. You need to become so familiar with the camera, kind of like someone you slept with for 20 years, that you know every part of everything in total darkness. It's completely forgotten. It's total muscle memory. And the same thing needs to happen in your brain when it comes to what do I want to expose for? What's the image I want? You have to have the confidence of Hercules that you're not engaging in douchebag photography. You're not a blind squirrel that's out hunting for a nut. You're not a broken clock, okay, that is right twice a day. And you're not Rambo, sticking your camera on continuous high and spraying and praying. It's like, I'm going to throw it into bracket mode and continuous high and spray and pray. It's like, okay, I can extract one image out of that. Time is money. And if you have to sit there and manipulate all these shots in post, time is money. Even if you're doing it as a hobby. It's not worth it to do that, and you're not advancing your skills as a photographer. You're just not. Now let's move on to the next sort of image. So we went from spot metering the bottle at 50th of a second at f9, and we stopped it down 3 to do that sort of special shot that I talked about, like last month's contest. What I did for the next shot is I opened up 3. So I went with f9, then I opened up the aperture 3 stops, and what that did is on my tonal chart, my Ansel Adams zone range, I'm able to read all the way to 0. Okay? 0, the number 0, and 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth is all visible. The stamps, the detail, every little detail is visible, and the red writing on the bottle, the absolute top highlight, which is almost 5 stops from down here. We have nearly 5 stops of difference. And of course I can push this in post too, but I've got it on the camera. All I have to do is crop it and maybe adjust the contrast and sharpness a bit. I've got it on the image. I don't need to adjust it. I've got it what I wanted. Because I know what I'm exposing for, and I know what I'm trying to develop not in Photoshop, not in post, but what I'm trying to make appear on the back of the image through my exposure. Okay, I'm metering for up here. I'm going to open up 3 stops. I'm not going to blow my highlights up here. There are times like where blowing highlights is just unavoidable and it's compositionally beautiful, but the general rule is, in photography, there's an exception to every rule, is that losing stuff in shadows is totally acceptable and perfectly fine. But if you start blowing stuff out on your shot, that is when things get real ugly and basically nobody likes it. There are plenty of exceptions to that, but that's the general rule. And that is basically unquestionable. Now on my 4th shot, this would be the point where I'm actually blowing my highlights. I've blown the highlights in the bottle, so what I've done is I've actually opened up 5 stops. What I've done is I've exposed strictly for my shadows, the base undertone of the sea urchin right here. And this is the example that I showed you yesterday of where someone is laying on their back and they're shooting through the translucent petals of a poppy and the bright glaring sun is beating down. So the sun is blown. The sky isn't blue anymore. The sky is blown. The sun is blown. You can still see some aspects of the sun star, but what he or you has achieved is perfect exposure for the translucent red petals, for example. Of course, this isn't translucent. Well, it is translucent, the sea urchin, but exposing for the translucent petals. So I've actually purposely blown my highlights, but that was a compositional choice. Instead of being Rambo and spraying and praying, it's like, oh my God, I wasn't trying. And everybody does this. You'll bracket stuff and you'll go look at it later on your computer. It's like, oh my God, I wasn't even trying to get that shot, but that turned out so well. You know, this is the broken clock and blind squirrel thing. You know, the clock is right twice a day that's broken, and the blind squirrel finds a nut. Okay? And that's awesome. It's like finding buried treasure that you weren't actually looking for. You know, you can't engage your photography like that. And a lot of you have said, well, you know, I can push it. I got a D750. I can push my shadows and, you know. If you've got a few compositional shots that you want to push and post, that's great. But you don't want to be engaging in that, and that is not how you're going to advance your skills. You are not. It's not going to happen. Okay? When you take a look at this scene, I know what I'm exposing for, and I know what I'm going to change my composition to, because I have the confidence of Hercules, excuse the analogy, that I know what, I'm not a blind squirrel and I'm not a broken clock. And I'm not Rambo. I'm not going to sit there and spray and pray. You know, continuous high is there for a reason, for capturing kids and dogs and sports and action. Program mode is even there for a reason, okay? I'm not totally against, you know, program mode is a necessity. You know, there's some things you just don't have time to meter for. But the point is that this zone system is absolutely 100. You cannot deny this. You can't protest it. There's no disputing me on it. You know, I don't care if you like the zone system or not. I think it's too complicated. Well, Ansel Adam used it for, you know, adjusting things. He did. But he also said, you know, before he died in the 80s, that it's definitely applicable to digital photography. He called it current electronic, current age digital photography. He didn't use the exact words digital photography. He was talking about new age electronic photography. And it is absolutely applicable. Okay? Now, you're not doing developing of film. You are doing pushing and pulling and post and Photoshop or whatever application is you're using, but you got to get the shot right to begin with. Okay, and you got to have what is in your mind, because what you see here is a moment. There's no image here. This is a moment. What you see on the camera and what my eyeballs are seeing right now, they're both the same thing, unless you're colorblind. You are about capturing and creating an image. Not capturing a moment, but creating an image. And if you're going to be in the business of creating images, is what defines professional photography and advanced photography, it's not about what your eyeballs see right now, but it's about what your mind sees and making manifest. Okay? And if you don't understand that, you're not going to understand anything. Okay? Thanks for watching.